Here we go. The biggest school system in North Carolina, that would be Charlotte Mecklenburg School System, has launched a lawsuit against social media giants like Snapchat, Facebook, TikTok, and others, alleging that the companies are kind of preying on children. They are marketing directly to children a product that is harmful for public health, mental health in particular, as well as addictive. I think all of us, even adults, would agree with that social media is definitely addictive. Now, this is a trend with school districts. There are around 200 school districts across the country who have already launched similar lawsuits. And so to break it down, I've invited on Professor Bill Jacobson. He is the founder and president of Legal Insurrection Foundation, as well as law professor at Cornell. Welcome, Professor. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
So what are the legal particulars of this case? Just an overview.
Well, what it is, it's almost a 200-page complaint filed out in California and also filed in the in North Carolina federal court, which basically try to use a product liability sort of analogy. Think of the tobacco litigation, that you had a product, you misrepresented to the public, you knew it was addictive, you knew it was damaging, you did all your internal studies that came out through the tobacco litigation. And in fact, you portrayed it as something else, and you got all these people hooked on it and they suffered from it. And so that is essentially what it's saying, is that the social media platforms they have produced are inherently addictive and inherently damaging, maybe not for everybody, but for a significant portion of the users. And therefore, these are essentially defective products that have been mismarketed, and they are responsible for the damage that they've done. How you're going to quantify that might be a different story, but that's what these are. These are essentially class action suits alleging defective products.
Well, it reminds me of the anti-vaping lawsuits that were taken on by attorneys general across the country. North Carolina was chief among them, where a big settlement was reached, and the money, I guess, went to causes like stopping tobacco, etc. And so what's the difference, if any, between a product that's like an actual product that can be linked to causation, for instance, and a product as diffuse as social media?
Yeah, I think that's a great distinction that the courts are going to have to grapple with. I did check in the California case, and there has been a motion to dismiss filed. It does not look from the docket like it's been decided yet. And there's, of course, a lot of parties in that case. And the court's going to have to decide, is social media the equivalent of a vaping product? I think in the vaping cases, there was an allegation that it's inherently damaging, that it will damage your lungs and maybe cause other physical damage. And that's similar to the tobacco cases. I mean, the tobacco cases were groundbreaking, but we know medically, we know scientifically that a certain percentage of the people who smoke tobacco are going to get cancer, whether they get it this year or they get it 20 years from now. So that medical science is there. I don't know if it's there for the social media. I just don't know. But this is something the courts are going to have to grapple with. Is social media the functional equivalent of tobacco?
Right. I mean, there's behavior and decision and time between exposure and the behavior that's involved. I mean, there's one case that a terrible case of a mother. She's an influencer, a self-help guru, and her son apparently on Snapchat was able to buy drugs. 16-year-old took one pill and died of a fentanyl overdose. Now, maybe there's some sort of cases like that they'll present. I don't know. But maybe that's more, of a direct route, rather than saying in general, on a public health level, this is a problem.
Yeah, well, the issue in social media is going to be there's a lot of intervening factors. Okay, with tobacco, you can make the direct causation between your cancer and the smoking of tobacco. Maybe vaping too, whatever the physiological problems were. Here, you've got so many complex problems that there's social media, there's social peer pressure, there's parental pressure or parental inattention. There's so many things that can influence the impact that going on Facebook has on you, that it's much more diffuse than tobacco. tobacco they can study. A certain number of people will get lung cancer. A certain number of people will get other cancers. So I think that's another thing that's going to make these more difficult. That doesn't mean they're impossible, but the courts are going to have to grapple with whether an internet product basically is the equivalent of a product you can hold in your hand and put a match to and smoke, whether they're the equivalent. And I just don't know how that's going to come out. But I would not be shocked if a court says, well, wait a second here. While we can say for a total population, there's a likelihood that some people will have problems with social media, there's a ton of intervening factors that would implicate whether a particular person gets the equivalent of cancer. And those factors are not really present for things like tobacco.
Right. I mean, and also there are a number of, and I'm going to go over this later in the show, but there are a number of products that I want to tell parents about that can drop down on screen time, that would alert parents if there's any damaging material, and will give you opportunities to set that. Because I mean, look, I'm the parent of 2 teenagers, and I know that it's ubiquitous, and try as I might, I don't feel like putting on my armor and fighting every 10 minutes to take the phone away, etc. And so we have to, deal with it. So I think the solution, which we'll talk about later, is more of the, the parents need to be aware. But I often wonder too, if lawsuits like this, particularly by the school districts that have been named, San Francisco, Seattle's one, and Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system, I often wonder if this is a way to blame shift from the shortcomings they have. For instance, Charlotte-Mecklenburg School right now is under an investigation by the U.S. Department of Education for Title IX violations, and specifically failing to report rapes on campus, not penalizing sexual harassment claims or investigating them properly. There's been a huge uptick in violence, and we know that having a very corrosive, hostile environment also causes mental health problems.
Yeah, that's why I say it's those sort of factors I would expect would be part of a defense if the lawsuit moves forward, is that there's so many different factors that you can't draw the direct causation from going on Facebook to engaging in self-harm or something like that. So I just think there's so many factors. It's going to be an issue they're going to have to confront as the lawsuit moves forward. The other question I have in my own mind, and these are very good lawyers representing the plaintiffs. I mean, these are tort lawyers who've done big cases. Okay, so I think they probably know what they're doing, but just reading it, it strikes me that why are the school districts suing here? Why are they the ones who have so-called legal standing to sue on behalf of the people in their community? So that's another thing. Why these plaintiffs? Why the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District? Why not a parent in the school district? It just, so that's also curious to me. But again, these are mass tort lawyers who've done this a lot in other contexts. They probably thought that through. And if there's 200 plus districts that are suing, they probably think they have a good argument why the school district. They probably will say that these cause problems in the schools, these cause added expenses in the schools, additional, and therefore the schools are harmed by this. But it does seem odd that if what the argument is that this is so damaging to children, that the ones who are bringing the lawsuit are the school districts.
Right. I mean, if there are damages awarded, where would that go? Would it be dispersed? I mean, it's a school board. So would it go back into the district? Would it go towards rehabilitation programs? Would it go to the victims? I mean, we don't know, and that's what makes it, in my mind, if you're having a pecuniary interest, if they're alleging that for the social media giants, you could come right back and say, well, that's the school boards, because they just want the money in their district as well.
Yeah, and that was a problem in the tobacco litigations. It may not be a problem in terms of winning the case, but the distribution of the funds. There was a lot of abuse where a lot of municipalities got tobacco settlement money and used it for other things. They didn't use it to treat people who have lung cancer. They didn't use it for non-smoking campaigns, or they didn't use substantial. They used it to fill gaps in their budgets. Right. So, at one level, my kids are grown, but even back when they were kids, the earlier days of social media. There's no question that social media is addicting. They're just, I mean, everybody knows it. Okay. The question is it, there are a lot of things that may be addicting, but doesn't necessarily give you a legal right to sue over it. I mean, sugar is incredibly addicting. Your sugar craving, can you sue the sugar companies? Maybe it's been tried. I just don't know the answer. But my point is, just because something can be addicting, so was TV. Before the internet, the kids used to be addicted to the cartoons on TV. Do we sue the networks? Where does it stop? And I think, again, tobacco is different because it's a product. It's something that you have a direct harm. Nobody, I think I'm safe in saying this, nobody gets healthier from smoking tobacco. How damaging it is might be a different thing, but nobody gets healthier from it. And that's very different than social media. People use social media for a lot of different purposes, and whether it's good or bad, I think it's one of the worst things that ever happened to our society personally. But, there are upsides of social media. It's not all downside.
Right. I mean, they may argue that, look, there's a lot of support groups that you can find through YouTube and TikTok. And that is true. Yeah. And so I'd imagine the other side would argue that. But I will tell you, one good immediate fallout or repercussion of this happening is that last week, Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, and again, largest school system, a lot of problems, a lot of violence, said, we're going to outlaw phones in schools, right? Because they wouldn't be able to be in a very good position if they're allowing phones in school and saying, oh yeah, social media is a problem. So, I think that's good. I think raising the issue in general is good, whether it is a parent doing it, whether it's a school district doing it, and others. I think that, that shows that, look, we're going to take on the no-brainers here, right? I mean, I think there's been a lot of studies on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably they're not paying the lawyers. Lawyers are taking it on contingency fee, which would be very large if they're successful. And so there's no out-of-pocket cost in all likelihood to the school district to do this. And it gives them, as you've indicated, a potential out for all the problems in school. So, even in law schools, I don't know if the debate was ever settled, but for a number of years, there was a huge debate about whether we should ban laptops in our classrooms and in law school.
Interesting.
And I think the decision was to make no decision, basically. But the law school purportedly, I know this was several years ago, I don't know if they still do it, has these like blocking things in the classrooms that are supposedly block the internet. But from whatever every student tells me, they don't work. Okay. So they're on the internet during class. There's probably no way to stop them. They get panicky, if they don't have access to their laptops, because their whole life has been, you take notes on the laptop, you do everything on your laptop. To say, shut the cover, we're not doing laptops anymore, is a problem. And I would imagine in elementary school and, K through 12 saying no phones in school, there's going to be some withdrawal symptoms. It's like going cold turkey. You may need to hire a whole bunch of mental health professionals, not to deal with the internet addiction, but to deal with the cutting people off from the thing they're addicted to. So this is a real problem. Like I said, I think social media is one of the worst things that ever happened to our society. I don't think people are worse nowadays than they were before the internet at all, but the internet and social media has given them an ability to find other worse people and get together and do bad things and to reach out and touch you. So rather than just whispering rumors about you in the schoolyard, they now can, spread things far and wide. It's very destructive, but it's here. It's not going away. I do think, though, the social media companies, from everything I've read, do tweak their algorithms to make them more addictive. And maybe if the one thing that came out of this was not just money for school districts, but forcing the companies to stop playing mind games with our kids, okay? And stop manipulating the kids through algorithms and artificial intelligence, and make your platform available, and whatever happens, happens, but don't manipulate people. And we all know they manipulate us tremendously.
Oh, yeah. Well, whether it's in the realm of politics for the adult side or even, gender ideology on the other side. I remember reading something that in China, and other countries, when you look on TikTok, there is absolutely zero of this promoting of gender ideology, et cetera, and the trans community and glorifying it. Only in America. Now, I don't know if that's true. I remember hearing that. If true, I find that very interesting, and it proves your point that it's almost like tailor-made destruction of an entire generation, if that's true.
Yeah, I read the same thing, that TikTok, I think it was in particular,
Yeah.
what they see and how they manipulate it in China versus the rest of the world is very different. And I think that it is a very destructive force in our society. TikTok seems like the crack cocaine of the internet.
Yeah.
And so the rest of the hard drugs and narcotics are bad enough, but
Yeah.
I've never used TikTok myself. I won't put it on my phone because it's basically spyware.
Yeah.
But you see replays of TikTok elsewhere, and it does seem to be the crack cocaine of the internet, that people just get this high from being TikTok personalities, more so than they did about being Twitter personalities or YouTube personalities. There's something about it, the way it's structured. But from what I've read, that's not the way it's done in China.
Well, there's been a rash of suicides from young TikTok, in particular, influencers. So, adding to what you're saying, that seems to be addictive, whether or not, people opt in, people opt in with certain mental conditions already or not. That would be an interesting study to figure out. But I do know that, at least this will have an airing, a full airing. Perhaps news of this, the development as the case goes along, would, I don't know, open people's eyes to what's going on and just get it top of mind, because parents are so busy right now. I mean, and a lot of people, especially in this economy, parents, single parents, whatever, they're just trying to hold on by their fingernails just to not be fired or laid off this week. And the last thing that they worry about or think about is potentially the most dangerous thing in their child's life.
Yeah, well, I have grandchildren who are approaching the age, and they're not there yet, when this is going to become an issue. And hopefully there will be mechanisms in place to avoid that generation. I feel kind of like my generation was between, we didn't really have the internet like my kids did, but we weren't, didn't have those problems. We had other problems, but not those problems.
Right.
And I think that the generation upcoming, I mean, my oldest grandchild's going to be 5. And so, in 3 or 4 or 5 years, her parents are going to have to make that decision about what access do you give the kid a phone. I certainly would say no, not at 7 or 8 or 9 or 10.
No, we see them all the time. Yeah.
But those are the decisions. And I agree with you. It's very hard to control, because then they go to a friend's house and they use it there. And how much can you really block the internet for little kids? It's tough. It's tough. But part of the solution is to get the social media companies to stop manipulating us. And that's going to be hard, because it's in their financial incentive at this moment in time to manipulate people and keep them addicted. If they get held liable in court, maybe that financial incentive won't be there anymore. But it's really terrible, the stories that have come out about how these things are manipulated to keep you coming back and keep you coming back.
Yeah. So social media companies, if you want to stick to manipulating adults, I guess we can have that, but stay away from the kids.
Yeah.
Right. So thank you very much for explaining this to our audience, and I appreciate this. And guys, we were going to keep you updated as this goes along. Stick with us. We're going to review the top products that you can use with either an Android or an Apple to hopefully curtail some of these dangers and to keep your child safe, especially with school starting. Well, there's no doubt that social media does not work for teens' mental health, in particular girls. There's a lot of research that has come out. In fact, a recent study that shows that the social contagion of all this gender bending nonsense and the trans and the non-binary stuff happens to come from TikTok in particular, but other social media chat rooms. And how are we finding this out? Well, detransitioners, big time detransitioners, are telling us, hey, the place where I interfaced with the most media that meant the most to me, or was as, kind of changed my mind about being a trans or egged me on into it, was social media. And studies have shown that the more time that teens spend behind screens or scrolling on their social media, the more depressed and the more dissatisfied they are with their life. Kind of makes sense. And I'm sure during the lockdowns, this was really exacerbated, where there was a lot of boredom, parents had to work, teens really felt they had no other alternative and kind of turned to social media. So decisions about what your kids need to hear and see, really, I mean, I think we can all agree with this, should not be coming from Silicon Valley. They do not have our best interest in mind. But if you're like me and you have been really publicly flogged until you got your child a iPhone or a cell phone because they're 14 or 15 and all their friends have it, there are a couple of products, I haven't tried any of them, and I'm not sponsored by any of them, I just want to tell you about them, that seem to address problems that we had from bad content to too much screen time. One of them is called Aura. Okay. And what it says is it's got all these little social media icons down here, you can see. Okay. And it says it's going to manage your child's online activity. It's got parental controls. And what it's going to do, it says it's going to monitor content and block sites. So if you already know that there's, 10 sites, if you're like me and you're definitely going to block Disney, it will apparently allow you to do that. Limit screen time. That's a big one for us. And so we do like an hour of screen time during the week and, 2 hours on the weekends, something like that. Pause the internet. If you want to ground your kid, this is a big one for us. We want to take the phone away from our kid, maybe if they've not picked up their socks or whatever, right? But we don't want the inconvenience of not having a phone for when we need to pick them up after practice. So it looks to me like you're able to kind of restrict the internet so you can still have calling abilities. That is a product that ranked really high. Here's another one. It's called Bark, B-A-R-K. I'm going to put this up right here. So it's another, looks like it's a similar product. In fact, the websites look kind of the same. They say that they protect from new dangers for the new generation. So again, you can monitor the content, screen time, block websites, and you can track location. So, if your kids are going on field trips or, church outings, whatever, and you're like me and you like to see where they are just so you can go to sleep at night, right? This looks like a great monitoring tool. Again, I've not tried any of these. What I want you guys to do is, number one, share this video, because I think it's just really important to have this stuff at the top of mind. And number two, we need to come together and share what are the best products, which one worked well, which one was a ripoff, whatever, so that we can spread the information across the community. And I want to leave you with this. There are a lot of moms, unfortunately, like this, but I just wanted to show you Laura Berman's story. This is the mom who is fighting against social media companies, namely Snapchat, for what she believes is no controls over the social media giants, no controls. And her husband, or excuse me, her son, took one pill from someone they bought something off of on Snapchat in 2021 and had a fatal overdose. This is a mom who's was very involved with her teenage son. And again, it doesn't matter often how involved you are, because social media is so ubiquitous that it's really hard to monitor these things. So I don't know if a product like that Bark or Aura or any other monitor could have helped. They purport to tell you when your child there's some dangerous content, so maybe it would have alerted this family. But the more that we can know what our kids are doing and monitor, the better. And so there are stories like this everywhere where sadly kids are influenced on social media, parent knows nothing about it. something catastrophic happened. So I hope this this podcast has been particularly helpful to you guys. I ask that you share it with 10 people, 10 parents, whatever, just so that they can see what's going on, and maybe they can take their long overdue steps they need to help make their child safer.